So essentially I had to do this project that involved a SQL database and Java. So the assignment essentially had us use SQLite to form a database with person objects. So we had to do the essential select, update, delete, and other SQL stuff, and it was pretty straightforward. I didn't really run into any issues with this one. It was fairly easy. I normally use Visual Studio Code, but due to the nature of the specific project, it was actually easier to use Eclipse due to the integrated nature of how you can just import libraries very easily into this. So what I basically did was that I created a person object, and this person object has two constructors. One where you pass in data directly by just immediately typing in the object parameters, and one without a constructor where later you could build a person, and I'll explain this later. This part actually just builds the SQL statement from the inputted parameters, and it builds it and returns using string builder. It returns a SQL statement that can be executed. So over here we these two parameters, these two functions in the database create class essentially just forms the file which I've named SQL test, and this one creates a table called person, and this part is just a user interface to do different functions and different actions on your database. So the first database function is the database create function, and with this it basically uses the API for the Java database creation, and it uses SQLite to do that. And everything needs to be nested in a try-catch branch so that it can work. So the next one is creating a table, and here is the SQL segment for creating the table of the person. And so this only needs to be done once, and that's why this particular thing is commented out. Really, I don't need these things anymore because they're handled by this now, but these two should stay in there because, like, if you want to recreate this thing on like a different PC, you would have to rerun this program, like uncomment these two lines of code out and execute them. So the next portion is info create, and what info create does is that it creates just a simple object that demonstrates a simple object insertion into the SQL database. So it basically takes these values and it just puts them into here. So what you're doing is that this part returns the SQL value for the next part of the SQL thing that includes these values, so that this SQL statement can be executed. And then this one is basically inserting a new person in there. So basically you are saying that, oh, you're starting at a certain ID and you're entering the person in there, and so it basically says while you're continuing to enter it, keep entering these persons and building so you're building a person by the build person function. So that's where this part comes in, and you're individually entering the person, and So you then just build the person and put it into the database using the build SQL function. And so it is a catch a SQL exception to make sure that that value doesn't exist, otherwise it'll throw an error. You don't want the program to crash, so this is you had to specifically handle the SQL exceptions. This one relays an ArrayList type person, because you want in here you want it. What does it say? Yeah, it says that it returns an ArrayList person of objects, and you want it like so this basically just takes this and takes all of the objects and exports it to an ArrayList of people, and this one just prints an ArrayList of people, and it just prints it out. Here, this one takes it's still exporting an ArrayList, but it's only like one person. It's searching for one person. It's just so that I can just reuse this function. So it's just an ArrayList of one person, and it just takes those values and you just select star to find it, and it prints it. So if you find an ID, if you enter an ID that doesn't actually exist, it throws an error. Out of bounds is probably not the best thing to do, because you can have a value that's above it, but lower ones don't exist, but it's probably the closest thing to making sense. So this one wasn't part of the assignment, but I wanted to practice using update anyways. So I tried doing a regex thing to make this value properly, but that didn't work out well. So I ended up just using a switch case saying that, if you enter first name, then it does these things. If you enter last name, it does these things. Because these little quotation marks are important for strings. So if it's not a string, then just use the normal thing. And again, it's just the next SQL exception thing to make sure that you're not typing something incorrect and crashing the whole program. And this is a delete the person, and you are deleting a person by just taking the first name and last name, even though entering an ID makes more sense, but like if you don't, but the assignment specifically called for entering the first name and last name. So it's like a delete from person where first name and last name, it equals the ones that you entered and where it exists. And this is important because you want to relay that the information actually exists and not something else, so that with this portion of the code in there, then this branch can execute. So so this will throw an exception if it doesn't exist, and it'll say no such person exists if the person doesn't exist. So that's basically my code, and I'm going to demonstrate it now. And so like I'm going to insert a person, and I think I start at 13. So like, let's say Ivan Braginski. Let's say he's 45. Let's say key smash, and add more records. I'm going to add one more, so just plus is the ID, and then let's say Svenska, I don't know. Enter age, let's say he's 12, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, and then I'm done entering the records. So then I want to enter more, so let's say I'm going to print a specific person. So let's say I want to get person 3, so it pulls up Bill Jones, and it pulls up his information. So what if I enter something that doesn't exist, out of bounds? So then I want to print all, and all of these guys' names are there. Everyone is there, so this returns their ArrayList and print it. And I've already deleted the first one because like I was listing the thing. So continue, yes. Update person. let's say I want to update to first name. Let's say name volatile. I guess it doesn't recognize the command, which is weird because it should. Not sure why that's not working. That's not part of the segment anyway. So delete person. Let's say I'm gonna delete Sven. And it no such person exists. That's weird. I'm not sure why that's the case. So I figured out what was wrong. Apparently, Eclipse has an issue. If you keep running SQL stuff, it locks out the database. So the database got locked out, even though all the code was fine. The database essentially got locked out. So I want to update a person. Let me update let me update so now the names are done successfully. So like it updated the name successfully. So now I want to print all and show that Lima got updated to 84 got updated to Lima Jones. So now I'm going to continue and delete a person. And I'm going to delete Ivan Braginski. And I'm going to delete a non-existent person. Although, wait. Oh, I removed that. Whoops. Yeah, we're not trying that out. So now it says no such version exists. But if I print all the names and delete. Oops. Lauren Pikachu. I guess it doesn't like that. I don't know. But what's the name? Well, I'm not sure exactly why it's not behaving exactly the way, but it's pretty close to what I needed to do. But yeah, that's basically it. And I think it's doing pretty well, considering like I only started working on this like 4 hours ago. Check the assignment thing I did 4 hours ago. Pretty easy, not really that much trouble. SQL's pretty easy, it seems. Might end up playing around with the Kaggle database now that I know some SQL. But yeah, that's basically my program. It would be kind of fun to integrate this with a GUI, but I guess that's going to be the last assignment. Anyways, that's my